All right, talk about the breakdown of the world trading system. We welcome back to the show Louisiana Senator John Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, welcome, sir. You know, the world trading system is broken. China and others have tariffs multiple times what we have in average tariffs. Wall Street and others are saying tariffs are inflationary. They weren't in the first term. What do you think about that? Mr. Trump's going to use tariffs. I don't see how he can avoid it.
Well, I guess, Larry, I'd answer you this way. There's an old saying, exercise makes you look better naked, but so does alcohol. And I say that because tariffs are a little bit like whiskey. It depends on the circumstances. A little whiskey sometimes can make the world look better. Now, too much will make you sick and it'll hurt you. I have never seen President Trump as this wild-eyed protectionist. I think he's, for the most part, always used tariffs selectively. It depends on the circumstances. I expect him to use them selectively this time. You can use tariffs to raise money. You can use tariffs to try to convince your neighbors to change their policy. We are, after all, the greatest economy in all of human history. But too often, the experts, when they talk about tariffs, they focus only on the impact on other countries. How about let's focus on America? I mean, if a country is expecting us to open up our markets to them, but yet they won't open up their markets to us, I think tariffs can be perfectly appropriate. I expect the president to use the tariffs very selectively, but appropriately. And if he doesn't, we'll offer our guidance.
Well, I think that, you're outlining, in a sense, a notion, a policy of reciprocity. I mean, sometimes to get lower tariffs, you got to raise them in the first instance. I saw him do it, and he may well do it again. Or, in the case of Mexico, we need Mexico to help us on the border. We need him to put troops on the border. We need him to commit strongly. I don't know if the new president of Mexico has committed yet, but the threat of tariffs may move her, closer to where we want her to be. And anyway, in the first term, we didn't have any inflation. We had tariffs, but we didn't have inflation. So I question that logic.
Well, I think the president will use tariffs against Mexico. I don't think he'll do it do it just to be doing it. But the truth is that the leadership in Mexico, no disrespect, but it's a mess. The successor to Lopez Obrador is basically trying, like him, to compete in the woke Olympics. That Mexico has turned very anti-America, not just on the border, in terms of business. And if you took the cartels in Mexico and turned them upside down and shook them, the president of Mexico, current and former, would fall out of the cartel's pockets. It's not acceptable.
Well, that's another point. I mean, he needs some. Mr. Trump needs some help on fentanyl. He needs some help on the cartels. If she's not forthcoming, he's going to have to take punitive actions with her. I think that's exactly right. Or go back, sir. I served on the China trade team in the first term. China was essentially intransigent. Their tariffs are 3, 4, 5 times what the size of our tariffs are. You got to have to use something to bring them to the negotiating table.
Well, tariffs can hurt China very badly. They're already hurting China badly in the semiconductor and technology era. But China is not doing well economically. And if we impose, I'm not saying that we necessarily should. It depends again on the circumstance. But if we imposed tariffs on China, 60% tariffs, I'm not saying we should again, but if we did, for example, it would hurt, and China would respond, but I can tell you China would be hurt a lot more than America would be hurt because of the trade deficit. Now, I want to get along with the people of China, but the leadership of China is going to have to understand that we're going to do things differently now. We're not going to appease you like President Biden did.
Well, then again, in the first term with the China tariffs, the Chinese companies had to cut their prices in order to sell into the U.S. market. They had to cut them a lot because of the tariffs. I mean, it turns out when you do a chart, I don't have the plot here, Chinese import prices, imports to the U.S. fell. It's not that they were inflationary, they were counterinflationary. They actually were deflationary. So I cannot figure out, my friends on Wall Street, where they get all this evidence that any tariff for any occasion is always inflationary. I don't get it.
It's not. Tariffs, it's another economic tool. It just depends on the circumstances. It would be fine with me if every country in the world went to zero tariffs. But that's not going to happen. We don't live in La La Land. And our tariffs, compared to a lot of other countries, relatively speaking, are very, very low.
We're the lowest in the world. We're like we're like, our average tariff center, we're like, it's somewhere between 2 and 3%, depending on how you measure it. And that is by far the lowest in the world. And I think that's the problem, though. The world trading system's broken. And the World Trade Organization doesn't implement it. They let China have these huge tariffs and say China's an undeveloped country. You know that's not true.
Well, the WTO is broken. It was an interesting concept, and I know part of it is that we have not nominated some members. But the truth is that WTO was broken. It took too long. I mean, you know, it would take years to get something resolved, and in a global economy, that's not acceptable.
All right, Senator Kennedy, thank you, sir. We appreciate your time very, very much. Talk soon.
Thanks, man.